want every one of you that have heard of ZeroXSpark to raise your hands. And I would hope that's a lot, because they are the hosts for this event. Keep your hands raised if you've heard of the PSE team or have heard of their work. Perfect. And keep your hands raised if you've heard of Semaphore. This is incredible and not very often happens, but I guess we're in a very biased audience. So I'm actually going to skip that one and go directly to what is Semaphore, for those of you that are not familiar with it. So Semaphore is a zero-knowledge protocol that lets you prove that you're part of a group without having to reveal your identity. And through this, it enables anonymous interactions. Going back a little bit more, though, is what are some of the facts around Semaphore? Semaphore was first presented at the end of 2019, with the white paper being released on the early 2020s. And by the beginning of this year, around January 2023, which is when I started working on this project, we were only aware of about 20 projects that had used this technology. So a big question arose for me, which is, if we have this technology that has been around for so long, it is an up-to-date public good, and it solves for several of the loudly voiced concerns around privacy in the Web3 space, why do we have such small adoption? Why is privacy not a thing yet? And why are the tools that we're building not being leveraged by those in the space? And so this was my starting point. Trying to understand why people haven't adopted and are not very familiar with Semaphore, I started looking at our website. And how are we presenting the information for the audience that we're trying to leverage our technology? As you can see, the website is very technically driven. You can find the documentation, you can find our GitHub. It lets you set up really quickly to get on hands building and go directly to the boilerplate. So here I'm wondering, which is the audience that we're speaking to? What are some of the barriers that exist to access Semaphore based on how the information is presented? And the next step on this process was moving from a research layer, which is how most of our work in PSE is built, to an application layer. How can we get closer to the people that are going to be leveraging the technology that we're building and provide for them and design a new experience through which they are able to interact with the information that we're putting out there, so that they are able to use the tools that we are building. And this is how I got started on this process of doing action-oriented research on how to present the information that we have on Semaphore. The research process that I did went through 5 steps. The first one was to identify what were the goals of what we were trying to achieve. As I mentioned, this was action-oriented research, so it was very important to know what was the end result that I was trying to achieve. So the main goal here was to inform the development of our new website so that we could enable the audiences that were identified that were relevant for them to be able to exploit and use the Semaphore technology. And here the question was, who do we want to build better resources for? The third step was to get to know them. So I conducted a series of surveys to gather data and jumpstart this information. We want to open this communication flow so that we could gather insights as well from the people that we were building for. The fourth step was doing interviews, going deep into what were some of the surveys. And what was the feedback that we were getting, while at the same time conducting A/B testing to see what kind of visuals worked best and what kind of information we were getting from them. And the fifth one was applying all of these learnings so that we could inform what our roadmap was going to be, not only on the website side, but also on the technical side, understand what were some of the CLI requirements that we would want to add, if we wanted to change our boilerplates, and also how we wanted to improve our communication strategy. In this research, as I mentioned, I was focusing a lot on communication, design, and functionality. First, my goal was to optimize for response rate. I really wanted to engage with all of these developers who are usually very busy and are not always very respondent in terms of interacting with people outside of this space, and get quantitative data that could inform our roadmap. And through these, I identified 3 different audiences that were using and consuming the information from our protocol. The first one was developers and buildings. And here the goal was to understand, why are people building with privacy? What is driving the interest in using zero-knowledge technology and offer it and leverage it in their dApps? What were some of the challenges that they faced as they interacted with the information on our website, on our GitHub, and also understand why Semaphore? How did they even heard of us? Like, how does it compare with some of the other options that they had out there? And what either made them make the decision to go for Semaphore or actually give up? The second one was understanding communities and end users. And the goal here was to identify how valuable is privacy for these groups so that they are overcoming barriers. As we all know, our technology is not as friendly yet as we would want. So it does represent barriers for people that want to use this technology. So how valuable is privacy for them so that they actually take this leap? And then the second part is, how do they choose which of these tools they are going to go with? And can the way in which they are choosing whether they use privacy or not influence that more developers and builders are catering for these needs? The third part was to understand and learn from other privacy advocacy organizations. How are they going about their communications? How are they most efficient in sharing how important and relevant privacy is? And were there some opportunities to collaborate with them? And so after 50 surveys and 9 interviews later, which I conducted through several different channels, which is really relevant in terms of how to understand which are the best ways to engage these different audiences. One of my main learnings was that some of the channels that worked well for developers, such as GitHub, email, or Discord, didn't work well for, say, communities, which are mainly based on Telegram or on Twitter. And then when trying to engage with privacy advocacy organizations, such as those based in the Web2 space, the channels that you want to use tend to be more formal, such as email. You need to go to where they are and engage them at their level and in the language that they understand. And a really important step here as well, and was one of our main learnings, is that familiarity builds trust. So I was only able to get responses to some surveys and get access to some of these interviews because I was familiar with some of the people working on these projects. I quickly saw, and if I didn't know them, I would try to find someone else that could introduce me to them, and that is what enabled me to complete a lot of this research. And I think this is particularly important in the privacy space, where people will only trust you and share information with you based on if they know who you are or where you're coming from. So what are the main findings? And this is something that I really want to highlight, particularly this slide and the next one, because I really want people to take these findings and implement them in your projects as well. The first one, the main findings for the community and the privacy organizations was that I had this hypothesis in which how communities came to different tooling started with identifying what is the problem that they wanted to solve. Then they would explore what were some of the solutions out there, identify what were the tools that existed, and then choose a tool. The reality is that this is not how people make choices in our communities. How it works is they identify a problem that needs to be solved, usually because something has already happened. Then they identify tools that other people in their community have already leveraged and use those tools. They don't check who's building them, how many people have built them. It's all based on trust. The third part is that the idea that users are pushing for privacy-preserving tools is not there yet. People are not yet asking very loudly for privacy-preserving tooling. Actually, only 30% of the people mentioned that they were going out of their way and using privacy tools in their process. But this is expected to grow with adoption. One of the other additional outcomes in the interviews and responses was that as people became more familiar and learned more about the Web3 space, they were more prone to use these privacy-preserving tools. And the fourth one was that privacy organizations find that speaking engagements are really important to bring out the word on what is the work that they are doing around privacy and the tools that they recommend. It's also very important that the way in which we highlight privacy is in a positive light. We don't want to scare people. We want to make them aware that privacy is one of their rights. Then, what were some of the main findings for the dev? The first one was that as people are going through their discovery journey, it's very important that we make tailored decisions around how we present our projects. We want to make them very easy to find by adapting our SEO strategies and be visible in social media. People still look for things on Google. So this is how they are going to find our tools and our protocols. The second one is that education is fundamental. While people will find the name of our protocols, often they will come to our website unaware of what is CK. So we also want to introduce them to the world of CK. And they are also looking for communities. They are continuously learning and they want to be aware that there's other people that can support them on their path. In terms of building, how developers found us was often through repositories of projects that used Semaphore as one of their building technologies. So you want to ensure that other tools that are using your technology are making it easy for others to find your repository. We found that several of the projects that were built in hackathons. So you also want to tailor the way in which you present your tools so that they are easily applied on a very fast-paced setting. People are eager to contribute, so make it really easy for them to identify what are low-hanging fruits that they can add on to your open source project. And lastly, people find it very good, and I think it may be obvious, to have very clear documentation that is up to date. If you make changes, you want to highlight what are these changes and what could break in them. The third point is trust is very important. People still want to understand and be aware of what is your brand. What are some of the highlights? For us, it was very important, and we actually didn't have it on our website, to mention that Semaphore is a public good. Like, leverage what are some of the words that are currently used in the Web3 space to highlight the importance of the project and the work that you're doing. It's also, for us, it was also important to understand that people want to see projects that were built with your technology. It makes it a lot easier for them to go from 0 to 1 if they are able to see someone else that built your technology, what was the use case, what was the code. And then last, use and leverage communication strategies. Go out there, give workshops, talk about how people can implement your technology, and tailor the tone for that. And with that, this is the outcome of this applied research. This is leading to the new website, to the new Semaphore website. And I will show you really quick what were some of the changes that were done. As you can see, we've added a section for projects, a section for build, and a section for people to be able to learn. And this is actually one of the sections that I'm most excited about, which is our section to build. As you can see, it's catering different kinds of needs that people have when they are interacting with Semaphore. The first one being if you want to integrate it to an idea that you already have. The second is maybe you're on a hackathon and you want to start from a template. And the third one is maybe you're looking for specific tools within the technology. And to close, at PSE we believe that privacy is a fundamental right. And we believe that permission should be purpose-specific, revocable, and informed and uncoerced. We are on a quest to build cryptography for people. And to do so, we need to understand what people are we building for. Thank you. This is our website.
Thank you, that was awesome. We might have time for one quick question. We have someone there?
Hi, Lau. So, really great presentation. Congratulations. I was wondering, what are your thoughts, or what have you found out at Semaphore that is exploring the learning possibilities? For example, this data that you just presented to us, I think it's very valuable for builders. I think a lot of builders are kind of focusing just on Web3 communities, for example, which I'm also focusing, but we are living on outside the Web2 communities, if you could say like that. And like, I think what you have presented is also like, there's not a lot of need for privacy right now in all communities, only a certain percentage of them. I think 30% was the number. So how are you approaching this, sharing this knowledge with builders, with communities, in a way that we can avoid us in this industry to just cater to this industry and try to find a better adoption? What are your thoughts on that and how we can apply it?
Yes. And here, there's actually a slide that is in the presentation, but I didn't include it because of time. We had one really good engagement with the UN throughout this research, because I was able to identify a hackathon that was being led by the UN agency against, I think it's like, I forgot the word, UNODC. And they focus on whistleblowing and how to avoid corruption. So we were able to partner up with them in a hackathon that they were running in Mexico that was centered around how to improve the supply and demand of pharmaceuticals. And we identified it as being like Semaphore is such a good technology for someone to build a whistleblowing enabling tool, right? So one of the other things is that our technology is already catering for problems that exist out there. Like, I think it's very important that we are more proactive in identifying what are these use cases, because people out there know what their problems are. They just are not aware of the technology that already exists that they could leverage to solve these problems that they have. And it is our job to identify which are the instances in which our technology could be used so that we make it more accessible and friendlier for them, and build these partnerships in with a long-term perspective, so that not only are we benefiting from getting more adoption, but we're actually solving needs from people out there. And some of the main findings from that interaction was, one, people at the UN and at the Mexican government were really interested in learning more about what we were doing, even if they had all of these technical barriers to understand. They were very open to engaging with us, giving us a space to hold workshops during the hackathon, do mentorships. They didn't charge anything. They were not expecting a bounty, actually. So it was a really positive experience. The second part, though, was that we're still at a very technical level in which our tools are not designed for low technical applications. So that was one of the main responses that we got from the UN, in which this technology may not be as useful if you don't have good internet, if people are not very familiar with the digital experience. So how can we also bridge into that space? But here I would say that one of the best responses is identifying who can be good partners that are interested already in solving the kind of problems that your technology is useful for.
Thank you very much, Lau.
Thank you.